In this particular video, we're going to go over strategy in solving quadratics. Now, when you guys are doing this, you actually need to think about three different forms, okay? So let's kind of review the do a quick little review before we read through the problem, the three forms. Can anybody in my class tell me one of the forms of quadratics? Anyone? I'm sorry? Factored form. Okay, so that's factored form. So I'm just going to write down an example of an equation in factored form. So I could say y equals parentheses x minus 5, 2x plus 5. That's not very neat. All right, so in this form, what is the purpose? Whoa. What's the purpose of this form? It reveals your roots or your solutions or your zeros, okay? So could you guys put just reveals zeros? So, for example, what would be one of the zeros right here? The number 5, and then we're not going to go over in depth. I've already done a video over this, but the trick is to take the negative version of this number over that number. So we'd say the other zero is at negative 5 over 2. That's the shortcut, so to speak. All right. So as a solution set, if you wanted to find the zeros of this, you'd say the solution set is a negative 5 over 2 and a 5. I have other videos that go over how to do that. It's called zero product property. But understand, it only works, the zero product property only works if your equation is actually set equal to a 0. It's not set equal to any other number other than 0. Okay? I'm going to change colors here. What's another form that we need to be aware of? Yeah, vertex form. Okay, so we have vertex form. Okay, we'll give an equation in vertex form. All right, so if we had y equals, let's put a 4x minus 5 squared minus 25. That's in vertex form. Now, if you wanted to solve for the zeros in vertex form, this is what you would have to do to solve for the zeros in vertex form. You'd have to set y equal to 0, all right? And then if you set it equal to 0, does anybody know what the first step would have to be to find your zeros? You'd have to add 25 to both sides. Okay. So you'd have to add 25 to both sides. Then you would have to divide both sides by 4, and you give you 25 over 4 equals x minus 5 squared. Oh, because these 4's will cancel out. I just left it as 25 over 4. Okay. And then this is where everybody needs to understand, once you have this isolated x minus 5 in parentheses squared, then and only then can you take what's called the square root. And on this side, you get what? A plus or a minus 5 over 2. If you're wondering how I got that, the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 4 is 2. And over here, you'd get x minus 5. And eventually, what would x equal if we added 5 to both sides? You'd have a 5 plus or minus a 5 over 2. So this is vertex form. So could you actually find your zeros in vertex form if you went through the problem of solving with square roots? Absolutely. Okay. So those are two of the main forms that people will use. Now there's one other form that we didn't talk about yet. We're going to talk about it right now. Okay. Yeah, standard form. All right. So we have one more form called standard form. I'll do that one in orange. All right. Now, standard form. So let's give us a big old bad boy here. Instead of y equals, okay? Let's say we had 4x squared plus 8x minus 24. Let's say that was in standard form. And we wanted to set that equal to 0. there is a certain formula that you could use in standard form, and its only purpose is to find roots or solutions or zeros. There's something called the quadratic formula. So the only form you ever use the quadratic formula is in standard form. And this is where you have to know it's an ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So if we look at our a value, what's our a value equal to? What number? 4. And what's our b value equal to? 8. And our c value is? Negative 24. Very good. Now, this is the part where not everybody's going to remember this by heart, okay? But this is the formula for the quadratic formula. Your x values will be negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, I'm not going to go from beginning to end and plug everything in and find our roots for this one, okay? But you would have to take what? Take the a value, plug it in for a. Take the b value, plug it in for b. And take the c value right there and plug it in for c. Does anybody remember what this value right here is called? Yeah, so that's the discriminant. And the discriminant basically reveals what type. We're not going to go over that's a previous video, what is the purpose of it. It helps you find the nature of the roots, whether it's two positive zeros, two imaginary zeros, or one zero, one solution. So that's the discriminant. So standard form, what would you use in standard form to find your zeros? Quadratic formula. Vertex form, what property are you going to use? The square root property. And in factored form, what form are you going to use? The zero product property for that. Okay? Whew. That's a quick review. You got that in your journal. It's going to help you with these problems. So let's go take a look at people. We have Tori and Gavin. All right, Tori and Gavin. So all I want you to write down for this example problem is what we start with. We start with x plus 1 squared minus 3 equals 13. So we start with that. Okay, so I just want you to write that down. We're not going to write down all of this. We're just going to write down that right there. Now, Tori said, I will add 3 to both sides of the equation and solve using square roots. Well, let's see. What would happen if she added 3 to both sides? Now, could we use solve using square roots and get our answer? Is that a viable option for Tori? Yeah. So I'm going to say, Tori, good job. I'm going to say definitely Tori works. Now, Gavin, here's what Gavin's. I'm going to change colors for Gavin. Gavin said, I will multiply x plus 1 squared and rewrite it as this. Then I will subtract 13 from both sides. Whew, so he did a lot. Let's see what Gavin did. Ready? So is x plus 1 squared equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1? This is, if we multiply it together, is equal to this right here. That works. I'll put minus 3 equals 13. Now, if we write it, let's see what we got here. 1 minus 3 is what? Negative 2. If we subtract 13 from both sides, we get x squared plus 2x minus a 15. If you subtract a 13 from this side and you subtract a 13 from that side. So here's our equation. What's my a value of this? 1. What's my b value? 2. And my c value is a1, b2. Hey, yeah, and you could definitely use the what? The quadratic formula if yeah, I would do this way. I would do it Tori Gavin likes to go the long road, but they still would get to the same final destination. But I would say Tori would get there faster using the square root property. But are those two viable ways to be able to solve for that? So yes, I'm going to say both. Both would work. So I'm going to click both. Okay. All right. Nice job. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, let's take a look at the next one. We've got Dimitri and Jillian. So this one, what form is Dimitri and Jillian starting with? The only thing I want you to write down is, yeah, factored form. Okay. So let's take a look. Let's write down the form. So Dimitri said, the left-hand side is factored. Is that true? It's factored. So I'll use the zero product property. Now, where did Dimitri go wrong in this? Technically, in order to use the zero product property, what does this have to equal? 0. So Dimitri would be right if that wasn't a 12, if it was a 0. So Dimitri, I'm sorry, we're going to have to say no, 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 you're wrong. Okay? Now Jillian said, I will multiply x plus 1 and x plus 3 and rewrite the equation as this. Now, here's a quick way. What is 1 plus 3? That's a 4. And what's 1 times 3? 3. And we know it's going to have an x squared. So that's a fast way of multiplying them together. That will only work if these are just what? That's a 1 and that's a 1x. Okay? And then, is that equal to 12? Sure. She says, then I will solve using the quadratic formula. Where did she mess up? In order to use the quadratic formula, what would she have to do first? Subtract the what? Subtract the 12. Because the only way you could use the quadratic formula is, yeah. So technically, if she said, then you would subtract 12 from both sides, and my A value would be 1, my B value 4, and C value -9, then she would be right. But right now, she's almost right, but not quite. Just like Dimitri was almost right, but not quite. You had to set it equal to what? 0. All right? It's like you're close, but no cigar. So right now, what are we going to say? Whose solution strategy would work? Neither of them would work. They both are almost right, but not quite. Now, if they're playing horseshoes and hand grenades, then they'd be okay. All right. Horseshoes and hand grenades is a game where you can play that you don't have to be totally right to get points. Okay? Or body parts falling. All right, so right now, Eric and Caleb, here we go. Ready? 0 equals I feel something's going to be promising on this one. Why do I think something's going to be promising? Because what did this factor form set equal to? 0. So I feel pretty good about this. All right. So it says Eric says the right hand side is factored, so I'll use the zero product property. You're right, Eric. Good job. Okay. I'm not going to solve it. I'm just saying that's a viable solution. Caleb, he wants to go a long way. He wants to do what? I'll multiply those together. So let's do it. Hey, if you haven't done this in a while, it's not a bad idea just to practice your little box method of multiplying things together. All right. Now, I know some of you like the FOIL method, and I'm old school. I use the FOIL method all the time where I do first outside, inside, last. But sometimes this is a lot more accurate for my students. Ready? What's 3x times x? Boom. 2 times x? Boom. 3x times -4? -12x. 2 times -4? -8. Then what do we combine? These like terms. We get 3x squared minus 10x minus 8. Does that match? Yes. Is our A value 3, B value -10, C value? So could you use the quadratic formula after distributing it everything? It would just take so much longer. But yes, Caleb, I'm going to say it would work. You're just going to be, Eric's just going to beat you and look at you funny. All right. But it would still work. Okay. So I'm going to say both would work. Okay. All right, hopefully I'm not going too fast. If you need to rewind me, you can always rewind me. But if you're in my class, you can't rewind me. But you can raise your hand and I can pause the video, and help you out. So we have x squared minus 3x equals x plus 1. Here's our final one. I like we kind of a more complicated one. This is good. Okay, so go ahead and write that baby down. Ingrid and Harish, we're trying to solve equations. We have this one. It says Ingrid said, I will first subtract x from both sides. So I'm going to do that first, okay? So I'm going to take away an x, I'm going to take away an x, and I'm left with x squared minus 4x equals 1. She says, then I can solve by completing the square by adding a 4 to each side. Well, remember doing this where we put the little box here, where we put the little box. Would you guys agree half of that is -2, and -2 times -2 is a 4? So can we add 4 to each side? And then what does that factor to? X minus 2 squared, 1 plus 4, which is? Okay, so right now, I think Ingrid is well on her way to solving the problem correctly because she completed the square, added the 4 to both sides. So Ingrid, you're good. So I'm done. I'm not going to keep going. Okay. Now I got to test good old Harrish. We'll call him Harry. All right. Hope that's okay, Harrish. So Harry says, I will isolate the x squared by adding 3x to both sides. Hold on. What do we got here? We got x squared minus 3x equals x plus 1. So he said he was going to do what? Add what to both sides? Add 3x and add 3x. So he's left with x squared equals 4x plus 1. And then he would solve it by taking the square root. Is this a viable option for solving for x? No. Now, where would it be a viable option if it was just x squared equals a number like 36? Then it would be a viable option. Then it would just be x equals plus or minus a 6. But here, this is not a viable option for solving for x. Okay? You would have to complete the square. Then you could do what? Take the square root of both sides. So Harry, not good. All right? Ingrid, better. He's just gonna get a number that won't make any sense. Okay? So on this one, who is right? Only what? Only Ingrid. And that's how you guys do them. Okay? Just follow their steps, see if they work. If they're viable, choose them. If they're not viable, do not choose them. Viable means like it would make sense, it would work, yeah.